Good morning and welcome to Science Club Live. Wonderful to have you with us. Uh, this is our last live lesson before the Easter long weekend, and great to have you all back. So, we're exploring underwater today, learning all about what we need to get under the ocean surface and explore the underwater world. Now we're going to go through the activity in just a bit and then have a look at some of the other ways that we can explore even deeper into the ocean. But before we get started, big thanks to everyone who's supporting Science Club Live. It's amazing. These are a series of lessons we are doing on a sort of voluntary basis. We'd love to do more. So your coffee donations, and that's where you can buy us a virtual cup of coffee, are really appreciated. And hopefully we can get some more of these science clubs in the future. Now, we have amazing amount of countries involved today. We have Germany, Australia, the UK, USA, Spain, France, Bermuda, Georgia, and India joining in today. So really, really wonderful to have you all with us. And I've got some shout outs just over here. So we have a special shout out, Alex from Macclesfield Academy, and Nathan and Joshua from St. John's School. Good morning to all of you guys. Really great to have you with us. A shout out to Lily Rose Robinson, who's in Hackney in London. Hi, Lily. Lovely to have you with us too. Hello from Mia, age 9 in West Sussex. Great to have you with us. Wonderful. And a big shout out to the Year 5 class at St. John of Jerusalem Primary School. Brilliant to have you all with us. And thank you to your teacher for helping out. And it's great to have you all here. We're looking at exploring underwater today. And just to give you the format, so we'll quickly go through the activities, and those were around dive signs and animal dive signs. So really looking forward to those, seeing how much you can remember. Then we'll have a look at some imagery of exploring underwater. And last but by no means least, we'll try and get through as many of your questions as possible. I've already seen some great questions coming through. So everyone will remember what that one means? Great, I'm okay. Now, I find it really confusing, first of all, with dive signs, that this thumbs up doesn't mean okay, it means go up. Now, the reason why divers use signs is because when you've got your scuba gear on, it's very difficult to hear or to speak or anything else. There are full dive masks where you can speak, and there are some other special sort of little things where you can, with different types of diving gear, actually hear people talk underwater. So I'm going to give you a quick test of some of the dive signs and see whether you can guess these as I go along. So first of all, we're going to have who got that as go down. I hope you all got that. Let's have another one. Okay. Something's wrong. And if there is something wrong, then you can always point. Maybe the pressure isn't equalizing in your ears. So you can say something's wrong with my ear. Now, when we're exploring the underwater world, we may want to look at something. So look, and then we'll point. So look and then point. And what might we see? Maybe if we need to turn around, there might be a big shark behind us. And we can talk about sharks and different life. And it's really cool. What I think is really cool is that you use the names or the different features of the animals that might be on the reef. So of course, shark with the dorsal fin there, hammerhead shark, with that sign. You might even say, look, there is a lionfish. So lionfish, you can see my fingers there, which are representing the spines along the back of the lionfish. I wonder how many other ones you came up with. Great to hear that Toby Buckle is getting all of these correct. And Lockdown Meltdown is asking, how do you learn the signs and memorize them? It's a question of practice. So there's two types of signs, one of which is sort of safety signs, things like check your air. So looking at your dive, that's where your dive computer would be normally on the left hand. And then if you're out of air, time to stop, go up, those types of things. I'm feeling cold. Yeah, so these are all quite obvious. They're all quite obvious signs, but they're the ability to operate safely underwater. Now, the animal dive signs are slightly different. They're not sort of codified. They're not sort of like universal signs. They're really for fun and exploring the underwater world. And I've been through a few of them. So we've got the spines of the lionfish, the dorsal fin of the shark. Someone said this is the clownfish, Nemo, being a bit of a clown. But my favorite of all of them is the turtle. Now, who can do a turtle at home? Let's see how you're getting on. Okay, everybody try and do a turtle. Okay, yeah, brilliant. So try and get that going there. So that lovely turtle swimming motion, absolutely one of my favorite dive signs to describe different animals. Now, I want to get through as much as possible of exploring deeper underwater, and also then having a think about and going through some of your questions. Great to hear so many of you are getting all of these right. So let's have a look at exploring underwater. Now, as we said before, we've mentioned a lot that the underwater work that Encounter EDU with its partners is involved in is all about learning more about this underwater world. So you can see here the scuba gear being used, the mask, the air tank, the buoyancy control device, all these types of things being used to explore the underwater world. And if you remember talking about the XL Kaplan Sea View survey, and that was the series of expeditions around the world that was using this underwater camera to take photos of the reef and to share those both for science and for wider understanding. And many of the researchers that we work with are using this gear to do science. So it's doing science underwater. So this is just a tool to access this different environment. This is Ben Muller working off Curacao and taking water samples. You can see with that big syringe there. So this is very much about learning a skill to operate somewhere safely. Now, it might be underwater and you're using scuba gear, it might be in the Arctic and you're learning your polar skills. So doing science in remote and exciting places, you don't just have to be a great scientist, but you also have to have these skills to operate in these environments. So it does allow you to have a pretty cool job a lot of the time. This is just a shot to show you what it might be like operating underwater, again with the XL Kaplan Sea View survey, and looking at this amazing underwater world. Coming back, seeing that life underwater, we've got the clownfish Nemo there. We might spot, but very much not in the Caribbean, because in the Caribbean, Nemo hasn't got that far. Very much Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean basins where you might find Nemo. The tiger shark, something to look out for. And we'll come to both these animals when we look at how life is connected and how life is adapted to the coral reef ecosystem and habitat next week. But if we want to go deeper, do we need to have sort of different technologies? This beautiful sea fan gorgonian that we can see deeper on the reef here, this is from the Great Barrier Reef. If we want to go deeper, can we use normal scuba gear? Now, recreational, so sort of holiday scuba diving, really only down to 30 meters maximum. And that's really the bottom, sort of normally between 0 and 20 meters down. But you have some experienced deeper scuba divers. This is Norbert, and he was exploring deeper. The amazing thing is to think that if they wanted to go, this is down to, I think, 40 meters on the reef. It took them just a few minutes to go down, maybe 6 minutes to go down, 8 minutes to go down. Then they had just, I think total 8 minutes actually of working down here. And then because of the decompression, the need to come up really slowly with stops so that the gas doesn't come out of solution in your blood, then that took about 40 minutes to come up. So in an hour's work, they only really had eight minutes of actual work down deep. Going even deeper, then you're looking at rebreather technology. This is not your standard scuba gear. It almost looks like they're going to another planet, being able to dive down to 100 meters. You're using mixed gas. You've got nitrogen, you've got oxygen, you've also got scrubbers, which are, you can see sort of strapped to the back on the left-hand side of the photo. And this is taking the sort of carbon dioxide out of the air, so you can keep on rebreathing, add a little bit of oxygen in, and some helium as well. If you want to go even deeper and explore even deeper into the ocean, what can we have a look at? Well, we can use something called an ROV, and there's lots of different types of ROV. Very simply, they're like a robot submarine. And you can see a picture here, one quite a small one, sort of probably about this big, but you're going to get even bigger ones and go down to sort of 8,000 meters plus into the ocean. Now they're remotely operated, so you have this wire coming off here, and that's got a video feed and a control feed, so it allows you to steer the ROV, remotely operated vehicle, from the surface and also see what's going on. So you'll have people monitoring the feed, and also you can see just in the bottom of the photo there, you can see the little pad there to control. Sometimes you have a joystick as well, which is super cool. And then the great thing about using an ROV is you have all that video footage, and you can also review that later in the lab, in the science base, to see what exactly was going on and to have a bit more of an insight into some of the behavior that might be happening. Now, going deeper still, using submersibles. Now we have the difference between submarines and submersibles. So we have a submarine, those things you may have seen from sort of war films, those long sort of dark torpedo-like shapes. And a submarine can operate independently for months at a time, going from port out into the ocean and back again. Then you have submersibles. Now, submersibles need a mothership, a support ship to work with them to recharge the batteries, recharge the air, all that kind of stuff on a sort of daily basis. And this submersible used by the Necton mission, a series of expeditions they're doing in the Indian Ocean called First Descent. And these ones here, these are called 1002s, Triton 1002s. And they can go 1,000 feet down into the ocean. And you can see them here, these two submersibles dropping down. and then amazing sights you can see exploring deeper on the reef, deeper into the ocean. A mola mola, ocean sunfish there, viewable from inside the submersible. And it's amazing as you go down that perspex, that acrylic pressure hull, almost disappearing in your sight, and allowing you to keep on exploring and seeing and almost being part of this underwater world. Now, if you wanted to go deeper still, you need this amazing vessel. This is the limiting factor. And this is the only submersible in the world that is rated to go down to full ocean depth, 11,000 meters down, and come back up again and keep on exploring anywhere in the ocean. Now, this was used during an amazing series of expeditions, the 5 Deeps last year, where the team went to the deepest point in every single ocean basin. And it's also destined to be used for exploring some of the deep ocean habitats around the Indian Ocean and perhaps further into the Pacific, the Ring of Fire, and what lies around there. So Ring of Fire is what we call all the volcanic activity around the Pacific. So that was just to give you a brief overview of how we can explore the deep ocean, all the way from scuba, from about 0 to sort of 30, 40 meters, going deeper with this advanced scuba gear rebreather technology down to maybe even 200 deepest. Scuba dive, I think, has been sort of just over 300 meters down. Then also the use of ROVs, which is these robots, submarines, anything from sort of used for anything but, you know, shallow waters, but down to sort of 100, 200, all the way down to about 8,000 plus meters. Then submersibles, which commonly have only been able to go down to 1,000 feet or maybe a bit more, but now with this limiting factor can take people down to any point in the ocean. Brilliant. So now I'm going to come back to some of the questions coming through. Lockdown, meltdown, what experiments do you do? It's a great question. So in terms of experiments, quite often there are some, so just to divide up science. So there's different things you can do. You can do surveys. Now, surveys is just simply finding out what's there. And it might be using a camera. It might be using a video camera going along in a submersible, just filming what's there. And then that can be assessed back in the laboratory. So surveys are really important because very often teams are going to places that nobody's ever been before. The second thing you might want to do is to get samples. So to take physical samples, the smallest possible one, to do further research on the genetics and whether there's a new species and that kind of thing. So sampling can also be looking at oxygen flow, nutrient flow, how the different pieces of the ecosystem function together. So there's a sampling and taking that back to the lab and analyzing that. Then you can have what you call in situ experiments, where you set up an experiment on the reef, and that might be collecting sponge poo or something like that, looking at what's being excreted by certain living things on the reef. And so you can have in situ experiments where you're creating a tent, setting up sort of a little experiment and seeing what's going on there. So there's a variety of different sort of science that you can do underwater, but those are the main ones: surveying, sampling, and then in situ experiments. In situ just means in place. That's where they are. You do your experiment there rather than taking things back to a lab and doing your experiment back in a wet lab back in your sort of science base, whether that's on a ship or whether that's on what's called a research station on land. Great question. Martha would like to know, has anybody ever fought a shark? Certainly, I know of some scientists who've had to sort of like push sharks away that have been overly inquisitive, and I think this comes on to a sort of an interesting thing that we have about sharks, that we think they are these really sort of dangerous predators on the reef for humans. There's actually very few fatal shark attacks on humans a year. They are sometimes quite inquisitive. If you go diving at dusk when the natural feeding time is, of course, they're going to be more inquisitive and perhaps more aggressive. But very often, there isn't any particular danger from sharks for divers. Certainly, if you look like an injured animal, which is a normal prey, such as a seal flailing around at the surface, that might be interesting, but that's a mistaken identity. But the flip side of which is that I think there's between a sort of 100 and 150 million sharks are killed by humans each year. So we've got quite a sort of warped idea of the danger of sharks. From SDG Warriors, this is great. What are the main challenges that scientists face while scuba diving? I think, the challenges really are, well, you've got this basic skill levels of being able to be really stable doing your work. So you can't be bumping around and everything else. So you've got to be a really good scuba diver to be a science diver. Countering the currents, making sure your buoyancy, to get all those different types of things. And then the very simple thing of working underwater. So even at shallow depths, making sure that everything's tied on, making sure that everything's done slowly, making sure you practice a lot when you're on the surface, what you're going to be doing underwater. So everything has to be done incredibly methodically, making sure that it all works before you get in and you've practiced. And most of the experiments are super, super simple. So you can't really, have that much complex, or you don't often use that much complex kit in terms of leaving it out. You see all these things made out of sort of like tubes and sort of basic, sort of quite sort of like, what's the best word for it? Sort of like DIY kit being used in science experiments. So being a really good diver and making sure you practice your experiments before you get underwater. What is the deepest, this is from SDG Warriors, what is the deepest that scientists have studied? Well, scientists have been down to the bottom of the ocean, so that's sort of 11,000 meters odd, and samples have been taken from down there. But it's really exciting that we now have the capability to explore anywhere in our ocean, which opens up a whole new sort of era of exploration. Our oceans are super, super unexplored. So I hope that some of you who are watching will go into oceanography or marine biology and help discover more about what's down there. Because the fear is that with environmental change, including climate change, with exploitation of ocean resources, whether that be fishing or mining or oil and gas, that we might lose some of these amazing habitats before we even know that they're there. So really great to get into the water and explore, and especially explore deeper. We have George, who would like to know what lives down at the very bottom. I can't quite remember. They did take samples. I mean, some of the really, really deep things, like the snail fish is the deepest fish. I think that's down 8,000 meters odd. And then there's sort of some sea cucumbers, like the sea pigs are incredibly deep down there as well. But we do have I know that on the live chat, we can get up a diagram of exact depths of all these different types of animal and how deep they go. So that would be absolutely great to get on here. Ernie, great question. When you are scuba diving, are there any animals you want to avoid? Definitely lionfish, particularly painful. Fire coral, also particularly painful. Stonefish, very bad. Irukandji box jellyfish, very bad. So there's lots and plenty of venomous beasties down scuba diving. I think the ones that get a bad rap, as I said before, are sharks. Are plenty of things that are more danger to you when scuba diving than sharks. So those are just a few of those. In fact, I think the most venomous animal in the world is a marine snail called a Triton's trumpet, and it has to be really venomous, because if it gets somebody with a sort of almost like a sort of harpoon sting, then it's so slow that it has to be very venomous so that its prey can't get too far away, and then it slowly edges over to go and have lunch. So the Triton's trumpet, truly venomous. You don't want to get one of those jabbing into you. What is the deepest? Ernie, you showed the sign for cold. In what type of waters would scientists show the sign for cold? It's great. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You might just have, you might be in quite warm surface waters. It gets colder down, deeper, and you might just have not enough clothes on. So the different, you can have just a rash vest and swimming trunks on. So rash vest, like a sort of clingy sort of thing. You might have a shorty, so you might have a wetsuit that's just sort of like a t-shirt length and then short lengths. You might have a thin one, you might have a thick one, you might have a dry suit for going even deeper. So it's just about having the right clothing, and you can get, like on land, you can have just the wrong clothing and it can just get chilly, which isn't good, because if you start get chilly, you can start to go into hypothermia, and that's when some of the dangers could start. And we've got just a sort of on another sort of like sort of realm of questioning. Helena would like to know, what diseases can corals get? I mean, I think the most famous coral disease is black band coral disease, devastated corals in the Caribbean. Not huge amounts is known about how and why these diseases spread and when they come along. We've also, there's some initial research also connecting to plastics, so that plastics can carry coral disease more widely. So corals, like all animals, can get diseases. That's correct. Great question here from Martha. Has any explorer ever gone to the very bottom of the ocean? So yes, in 1970, I'm going to forget now, when we got to the bottom of the ocean first. Was it 1960 or 1970 something? That was in the Trieste. That was Project Necton, and that was Don Walsh and Jacques Picard, first people to get to the bottom of the Challenger Deep. Then a few years back, we had the film director James Cameron, the third person to get to the bottom. And then we had the fourth person to get to the bottom was last year, was Victor Vescovo. And then we've had, I think, 3 others. I think we're up to about 7 or 8 people who've got to the very bottom of the ocean. That's compared to 24 people who've been to the moon. So it's still a tiny number, but with the limiting factor, that was the submersible, the deep ocean submersible I showed you. That means we can get people up and down to the bottom of the ocean much more easily. So it's the first craft that has been designed for repeated voyages to the bottom of the ocean. So it's truly, truly exciting bit of kit that we have now. Oliver would like to know, what is the biggest underwater animal? It's really cool. It's not a fish. It is the biggest animal that has ever existed on our planet that we know, and that is the blue whale. So the blue whale is the biggest underwater animal, and the biggest fish is the whale shark. Some people might say that the siphonophore, the deep ocean siphonophore, a colonial animal, could be the really big, but they're super, super long, and they're very crazy and cool. So look for siphonophores online. We'll get on the live chat how you spell siphonophore. And I think there was a recent article I saw in the news about a really, really cool, very long siphonophore. Lily Rose, how far could you dive in a submarine? So submarines are designed, so the submersible's all the way down to the bottom. So it's a sort of up-down vehicle. So you take your ship and you drive over where you want to explore, and then you go down, explore it, and come back up again. The submarines are sort of torpedo-shaped submarines that you see in films. That's more about cruising around, probably sort of like 100 meters or so. I'm not an expert on naval submarines, but you cruise around and you can travel around all the oceans be operating for months at a time. There's a great question from SDG Warriors. Any examples of aquatic zoonotic diseases? Now, on the whole zoonotic disease, this is not an area of my expertise, but for Earth Day, that's 22nd of April, we have 2 great panel live lessons, the second of which is going to be covering zoonotic diseases and links to the illegal wildlife trade, so we can get onto those kinds of questions then. They are not live yet on the site. We're just confirming the final speakers, and they'll be up by the end of this week. So looking to book them over the weekend or beginning of next week. Ernie, do fish sleep? Ernie, great question. My favorite sleeping habit of a fish is the parrotfish. And somewhere on the website, we should have a picture of a parrotfish, which makes itself a mucus, basically snot sleeping bag every night, so that sharks can't sniff it out when they're hunting at night. So that's awesomeness. Very sadly, we're over time already. Thank you so much for all your questions. I'm not sure whether you have a long bank holiday weekend where you are, but if you do, enjoy it immensely. Enjoy the weather during lockdown, and if you would like a Science Club live project to do over the long weekend, the holiday, please do look at the Reef in a Box activity to do over the long weekend. It's great fun. We've done it with the kids at home here. They're 4 and 8, so they've had a lovely time doing that. And do get your photographs of that up on Twitter or Facebook. Our handle is @EncounterEDU, and would love to see any examples of those that you've done. Just to say massive thanks to everyone who's bought us a virtual coffee to keep Science Club Live going. It's really appreciated, and have a great few days off. We certainly will, and we'll be back with you next Tuesday. And I think that's looking at how life is connected on the reef, the food chain mobile, one of my favorites. Then on Wednesday, we have adaptation, super cool. And then we're going to look at how this amazing habitat is threatened when we get to Thursday next week. And that's the final of this series of Science Club Live. But for now, it's bye-bye.